Welcome to the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman. I'm joined by my star producer and co-host, Chris Brito. The impossible has happened. As Chris smartly predicted a few months ago, the Knicks are moving on to the second round of the NBA playoffs. We have a lot to discuss today, including that Knicks series with the Cavs, the future matchup starting Sunday with the Heat. Before we get to all that, Chris, I want to give you your moment in the sun and point out how you saw this coming many months ago. I told you it was one of the dumber predictions you had on the show. I was very wrong. You were very right. Tell us how it happened.
Stevie, you don't need to call me the Oracle just yet, but I feel really strongly about how the Knicks played so well with Brunson. It just seemed to me like the team was really clicking the last few months, and it showed. I think it showed on the court when they played against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it just made me really happy that it all sort of like was put together in such a way that it made the Cavaliers look like deer in headlights. Um, I think that one of the other things about the Knicks that I really enjoyed was the fact that they did this really without playing great games themselves. I would say they won this game because of the rebounding, in part because of Mitch. They won this also because of, you know, huge contributions from RJ, and obviously I mentioned Mitch, but also like Hart. Brunson proved to be a steady leader throughout all of this. I feel like he was the guy who we didn't have 2 years ago, but now essentially made all the difference. Um, and I think there are even more reasons to be optimistic now heading into the series with the Heat. Uh, but overall, I mean, it's hard not to be happy about how the Knicks are playing. You can tell the hype is live in New York City, and I'm just so happy. This is probably the best team that I have seen in you know, I did see the 1999 NBA Finals, but I was like, what, 8 years old? I just didn't understand the gravity of the situation. But ever since I really started following the team, this has to be the best team I've seen since I was a kid.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about before the show. I was getting into basketball around 07, 08. I was like, oh, I'll be a Knicks fan. They have a great plan to bring LeBron James in. You just got to wait it out 2 years. It'll work. And we've seen very little playoff success. And now this is starting to already look like the greatest playoff run of my lifetime as a Knicks fan. And I want to bring up something you said about, Mitch and this team. They didn't play perfect basketball. They didn't play above their heads. And at the same time, they were just better than Cleveland. Cleveland did not look ready. They look like the Knicks of 2 years ago, where the Knicks looked like that series 2 years ago really calmed nerves and really made everybody look comfortable. And like Mitchell Robinson, he averaged 8 points, 9.8 rebounds. That's not really far off from what he's done in the regular season. And yet at the same time, the Knicks dominated the glass. And if they're able to do that against the Heat, which we'll get to in a little bit, they're in good business. But obviously, this is just a total shock to me because they did it in 5 games. They looked pretty dominant in most of these games. It wasn't like Brunson's hitting buzzer beaters to win games. Like they were up double digits for most of this series. And the
Yeah.
way they were able to slow down Mitchell and the way Mitchell Robinson was able to outplay the two bigs were just shocking things to me.
Yeah, I think that was the other thing. I think a lot of people expected the Cleveland Cavaliers to like, you know, just be these behemoths that would capture every single rebound. But it just wasn't the case. Mitch, on a much cheaper contract, did a lot better than they did um, by himself. And I think this raises a lot of questions with the Cavaliers, whether like a two big man system sort of works. Um, is Elon Mobley a star in the making? And then the other element of it, which was probably the headline heading into this series, was where was Donovan Mitchell? Donovan Mitchell had a really tough series. He looked like maybe the fourth best player on the Cavaliers.
No,
And
I wouldn't go that far. He was still the best player on the Cavaliers, but you,
I would say Garland was.
I mean, Mitchell averaged 23 a game, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, and 43% shooting. It's not great, but to me, that was still the best Cavalier in the series. I think it came down to they got inconsistent minutes from Garland. They got very little out of their two bigs. They got nothing from their bench. And Mitchell was good. And for them to win the series, and I think we both thought this would happen, we both thought Mitchell would be excellent. And he was good. And that was just not close to good enough to win this for them. And
No, you know what? It's probably not fair for me to say this about Donovan Mitchell, but I just expected more out of him. I think he was sort of like celebrated as this guy who was going to be the difference maker for the Cavaliers. And, to an extent he was. He's going to make an all NBA this year and, led the Cavaliers from being a play-in team last year to a fourth seed, which is a big accomplishment on their behalf. But this team has a lot of holes. They need to find 3-point shooters. They need to find guys who can defend and shoot the 3-point shot. But enough about the Cavaliers. It was a good
wait,
series.
real quick, just to wrap it up with that, Garland in the series, 20 points, 5 assists, basically the same shooting, the same turnovers as Mitchell. So those two guys were good, but to win, they had to be excellent. I think you and I both thought they would be excellent, and they were not. And
They were.
I think you got to give Tom Thibodeau a ton of credit for the way he was able to control those two guys and keep them under control. Whereas the next series we're going to talk about with Milwaukee and Miami, the Bucks had no answers for Jimmy Butler. They did not know how to control that series. They played at a heat pace, and I'm curious what you thought about that.
The Heat Bucks or the Knicks?
I would say just in terms of Thibodeau being able to
Oh yeah, yeah.
mark on
I
this
think
series in a way that we did not see in the other series.
I think there were many tells we talked about in the last show where Obi replaced Randall when he wasn't playing well. The other I think it was game 4. And just like writing his players the way, like getting the most out of them in a way that he was able to respond to a lot of the Cavaliers lack of adjustments because they didn't really make any adjustments. And generally speaking, I think Thibodeau did a great job managing this whole game. And the other person who deserves credit in all this is Leon Rose. I would say all of the players that Leon Rose had a part in either signing or trading for over the last year or so played big roles, big parts. He was able to adjust in a way that this team became better as the year went on. I mean, look at Hardenstein, look at Hart, RJ Barrett, we gave him a big extension. He played incredibly. Like, just to see him play the way he did in this round makes me think like, wow, okay, this is the guy that we expected him to be, and he's playing this well on the biggest stage of his career. And that front office, Tibbs, the Knicks themselves, like, deserve all the flowers in the world right now for the way they're playing.
Absolutely. Yeah, Barrett was awesome after the first 2 games where it looked like this is a guy who should get less playing time. And then the last 3 games, he was awesome. So it's a great job by the Knicks overall. And now we're going to talk about their opponent, the Miami Heat, who defeated the Milwaukee Bucks in 8-1 upset. I think it's the 6-1 in NBA history. They did it in 5 games. And Chris, where do you want to start here? This was an incredible series.
I'll be honest, like, before I saw this Knicks run, I expected, I mean, the Bucks were my finals pick at the beginning of the season. And I even had a little money on it too. But, things don't always go our way sometimes in that regard, but I'm glad I don't know, I'm just it sucks for the Bucks because they had played really well during the regular season and just like fumbled the bag at the very end in the playoffs. And I don't know how badly Giannis's injury was, but I think a lot of this series, I fully believe that the Bucks could have beaten the Heat without Giannis. I mean, the Heat had Jimmy Butler and a bunch of undrafted players, which is no disrespect to them, but there are a lot of players on the Bucks who are a little more well regarded than the players in the Heat, and somehow they made it happen. And good for the Jimmy Butlers and uh and that Miami Heat team. Like, I don't know how they pulled this off, but Jimmy Butler is such an incredible special player. I'm nervous about him in with the Knicks. Do we want to talk about the matchup first, or do you have any other comments on the Bucks Heat
I would
matchup?
just say, I mean, Jimmy Butler, wow. Just he averaged basically 38 points a game in the series on 60% from the floor, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, didn't really turn the ball over. Every game of the series, he shot over 50%. So he was efficient, he was dominant, he got other guys involved. He was great. And to we he deserves most of the credit for this series, but for the Bucks to not make any adjustments at all and basically say, this is how we run our defense, this is how we run our offense, we're not changing anything. Again, this is not the first time they've had a quiet playoff exit very quickly, also to the Miami Heat. And so they just didn't adjust. They didn't trap Butler. They didn't double team Butler. They didn't force the ball out of his hands too often. They didn't try to switch other defenders on him. I know Drew Holiday is a great defender, but it wasn't working. Great offense often beats great defense, and that's what happened in the series. And there was just one of those, oh, if they beat our A plus plan or plan A, then they win. And there was no plan B, there was no plan C. There seemed to be no adjustments. And we've seen this too many times from Budenholzer, and I just think if the Bucks want to go from we won a championship, it was awesome, we're going to celebrate this team every 10 years, to we have one of the more special players to ever come across in the NBA and we want to win multiple championships, I think they need a better coach. And I think the talent is there to win this whole thing, and they just were out executed. I understand Giannis missed 2 games, but they didn't look ready. They blew leads in every game. They didn't look ready, and I think it's time.
I think the guy who could probably replace him is probably Nick Nurse.
I love it. I think that's perfect fit. And if Jimmy Butler was awesome. Jimmy Butler has 56 in a game. The next game, I gotta be like, hey, we're double teaming him on everything. He's not getting 30 shots off. It's not happening. We can't let that happen. He took more shots in game 5 than he did in game 4. They just I just thought they did a really terrible job. Jimmy obviously has to hit these shots, so he deserves a ton of credit, but I just felt like the Bucks had no plan for him. And you're seeing the same team 5, 6, 7 times in a 2-week span, and to just not try anything different is something that would drive me nuts. And I think now moving over to the Knicks versus Heat, I think Tom Thibodeau is going to do a much better job in terms of looking at what happened with Jimmy and saying, how do we make sure this doesn't happen to us? That doesn't mean it'll work, but I feel like you have a much better chance of it working by trying different things.
Crazy concept.
Right.
Really quickly on the Knicks Heat, I am confident Tibbs will make the adjustments. He showed me that he's someone willing to be malleable. The one concern I have is the Knicks maybe not meeting the intensity the Heat brings. Not that the Knicks haven't shown it, but I think the Heat are just sort of fearless in that way. And it's like you're going from the Cavs, who are maybe at a 2 or a 3, to like the Heat, which are a 7 or an 8 in terms of intensity. And I think it could be, granted, this is obviously the pessimistic view, right? And it could be because it's clear to me that the Cavs didn't have an answer for Jalen Brunson. Um, I think the Heat will be much better at making it harder for Brunson to score. They have more people they can throw at Brunson. And so we probably need Randall to come back. And yeah, I think if the Knicks win, they'll win it in 6 or 7 games. It's going to be a drawn out series.
Yeah, I think this series is going to come down to the Knicks making adjustments on Butler and making Butler more of a facilitator and a playmaker versus a 45 point a game guy. And I think they will do that. And it's going to come down to the Gabe Vincents and the Loves and the Struces and the Lowrys to hit shots. And I think it took a really good coach in Spolstra to come out and say, you know what? Kyle Lowry, he's kind of at the end of his career. I understand he's had a great career. He's not going to start for us in these must-win games. We're gonna go with Gabe Vincent. We're gonna go with Strus, and those guys have been very good, especially Vincent in the Milwaukee series. I'm hoping now that those guys have been starting more, there's gonna be more of a book on them. How do you slow them down? How do you not get them in the spots they want to be on? And if somebody's going to figure those things out, I think it's going to be Tom Thibodeau, who probably hasn't
Well, I'll
had
say
much
this
sleep in the
much.
last few weeks. He's probably laser focused on this.
Listen, I don't discount that, but we can't sleep on those guys either. Gabe Vincent torched Jalen Brunson last
Yeah,
game they played.
he did.
And the Heat, we beat the Heat 3 times. And it's not to say that I'm not confident going into this game, but we squeaked out the other game where Randall hit the game winner. So I just want to say that this is probably closer than we want to say it is, just because the Heat are an 8 seed. They're like the most deceiving 8 seed of all time. This is not an 8 seed. This is probably like a 5th seed.
We're the fifth seed, but the Bucks were
Right.
minus
Six,
650
fifth or sixth.
favorites in game five. The spread was 13 and the Heat won. So
Hmm.
I see your point about not take like you got to take it seriously, obviously, but at the same time, I think having this home court advantage and having this Garden crowd will really help make sure that they're ready to go to start this game because they've had that Garden experience now in the last few games, and I think having that crowd around them is really going to help amp them up for Sunday, which is those early Sunday games are usually ones where people are falling asleep, like the players. I think they're going to be ready to go.
Yeah, and like you can't say enough about how the Knicks have sort of like um the Knicks fans have like come out and shown out. Like I don't think I've seen one of the cool things from yesterday. I went to a Knicks watch party. It's just seeing like the rent like on the way there. I was just like seeing so many people in like Knicks gear and like sometimes you strike a conversation or whatever. And like it's such a great feeling. Like I feel like my whole life we've been sort of chasing that, like for a team that everyone's sort of rallying around. And I feel like most people in the city, New York City, at least, in Manhattan, maybe, are Knicks fans, and like just like nice to see. I don't know.
No, that makes total sense. Besides for Butler, what do you see as the most important matchup or key to the series?
I think the other key is probably going to go again, Bam and Mitch, and I'll tell you why. A lot of the success of the Knicks is predicated on them getting second chance rebounds, right? You eliminate the second chance rebounds, um, and that there goes a huge chunk of our offense because we're not great 3-point shooters, um, and it's not going to be as easy to score on the Miami Heat as it was against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and so that's the one matchup that I'm sort of looking at for now.
I 100% agree with you on that. I think it's crazy that like the way we're talking about this because the Cavs had like the number one defense in the league
Oh, it's
in the
true.
regular season, but at the same time, you're right. Like I'm way more nervous about the Heat defense, and these are be close, drawn out games than I was with Cleveland. So I think the Bam Mitch matchup is going to be huge. Where I felt like the Cavs had a big advantage in that with the two big guys, the bigger names than Mitchell Robinson going into the series. I feel the same way about the Bam one, and hopefully Mitch can continue playing stellar.
Yeah, and he has, and
Yeah.
um, I'm. This is not a level. It's not. I don't think this rises to the level of huge concern, but Jericho Sims is injured and leaves us a little thin up front. But I know we'll be fine.
You're not expecting him to play, but obviously Mitch has been injury prone his whole career. So if him or Hartenstein, you know, rolls an ankle and can't play for a half, you're right. They're thin. They're very thin. And so I think a lot of teams at this stage of the playoffs are thin. Like when Mobley or Allen got into foul trouble, which did happen a couple of times, they had no answers because they let Kevin Love go to Miami. But now Kevin Love, who's starting in Miami, if he goes down, they really have nothing behind him. They're using like Cody Zeller off the scrap heap, as the backup big. So it's not a Knicks thing. There are very few teams at this stage of the NBA playoffs that have depth. Like Boston and maybe Denver are really the only two I can think of that, like, if you need to go 9, 10, 11 in your rotation, you have options that make you feel okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, I think to be healthy in the playoffs, it's a gift and obviously luck also. I mean, look at the amount of teams that have a star player injured. I mean, we're going to talk about it later about Kawhi and the Clippers, but look at how injuries derailed their season very late. But anyway, I'm really happy that we're facing a matchup that we feel confident about.
Yeah.
But one series at a time, one game at a
One
time,
series at a time.
one quarter at a time. And regardless of what happens, I'm really proud of this team.
Absolutely. The last thing I would say about it is they really do need to get Quentin Grimes back. He's been questionable the last few games with an injury. And I think what we talked about with Milwaukee is getting different looks on Jimmy Butler. It can't just be Barrett. It can't just be Hart. If you can put Grimes in there too for 15, 20 minutes on Jimmy Butler, I think that'll really help a lot as well. So hopefully this week off for him will really help. And can't wait for Sunday. It's going to be incredible. So, Chris, let's move on to final thoughts right after this. All right, Chris, final thoughts time here on the All Hoops podcast. A very exciting show for us as Knicks fans. But let's move on to an unfortunate injury. De'Aaron Fox with the finger. It looked like they were ready to take control of that series, and then they missed the big shot down the stretch in Game 4. Then they reveal Fox, fractured a finger. He played through it. Didn't look the same. Now the Kings are down 3-2 going into Golden State. Is this over?
Yeah. It's over. But you know what? I think the Kings fans and the Kings players should feel like pretty good about their future prospects. I think, you have a star in Fox. You have a team that's like only going to get better. Hopefully it'll attract some free agents as well. But it's unfortunate. I just think the Warriors, they're like I don't know, they're like the zombie that never actually dies. They keep
I thought that was the Heat,
reiterating.
but it might be also the Warriors as well. In terms of Fox, look, he played full minutes, played 42 minutes in this game, 24 points, but 9 of 25 from the floor. That's like 36%.
Mhm.
And so he wasn't good, and Sabonis has not been good in this series. And I think similarly to Cleveland, they're going to learn from this, and they'll be a lot better in their next playoff run. And give them credit. They won a couple of games. They lit the beam in the playoffs. It's not like they got swept. And hopefully they can give us a good Game 6. Okay, speaking of teams that did not give us a good Game 6, the poor Clippers. Now Kawhi has a meniscus tear. Who knows how that's going to impact next season. Paul George did not play in the playoffs again. And I just don't see this working out now. They were my team to win it all, Chris. And now it looks like best case scenario is what? They bring Russell Westbrook back? Like that might be the best thing they can do at this point. And I feel terrible for Ballmer because I felt like he built this thing the right way and it's all gone sideways.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a point about the Clippers and Kawhi, Paul George. I've mentioned this on the show a few times that they should blow it up. And I think logically speaking, you and me, that's probably what they should do. At the same time, it's really tough to pivot from those two with the amount of money that they're making, their injury history, and the fact that they have a new arena coming up, I believe, next year. And it's just tough because they put Ballmer in such a situation where, like, oh yeah, let's just trust Kawhi and whatever he's saying. But now it's like there's this injury that he may have had before, and I think that could sow distrust. And I think if you're investing that much money into these players, like, I think there's a level of transparency you can expect, but who knows what we only know what's being reported out there. Who knows where the actual vein of the truth is? Um, it's just a shame for the Clippers. Like, we talk about the Knicks and the Kings being cursed, but how many times have the Clippers, like, you know, been the bride left at the altar in the
It
playoffs?
sucks because they've been close. Like they've been a couple of wins away from a Western Conference Finals or a West or a Finals, and just like somebody gets hurt, somebody gets COVID, somebody doesn't perform, they miss a bunch of threes. It's brutal. It's really upsetting because I think they missed their window. They're not. They're getting up there in age. George is 33 next week. He has not played a full season since when? He has not played a full season since his Oklahoma City season, which was now 5 years ago. And I think most importantly, as you said, I don't think those guys really have any trade value if you wanted to blow it up. 45 million they're each owed next season, and then they both have identical $48.8 million player options for 2025. So they're owed basically 2 years and about $93 million. So just to make the math work on a salary dump is going to be tough. And you can't really give them up without getting something back. So I don't see how this works. The only way it works is if you just get a really desperate team like a Charlotte involved that's just so tired of being mediocre and says, we'll take the gamble on Kawhi being healthy for us. But I don't think they're even thinking this way. I think they're thinking, I don't know what they're thinking. I think they're just panicked. And I don't see them blowing this thing up this summer, but it's too bad because I think they need to change of direction. Yeah, Chris, for sure. Absolutely.
No, no, sorry, I was in mute and I didn't even realize.
I
But that was
didn't know
just
how to tell you.
no. The Clippers are in an impossible situation for the many reasons you listed, but also, like, at the same time, if Kawhi, Paul George, and whatever band members you want to include there, they come back next season, they're still a contending team. There's just like,
I mean, I would give it one more run just because you don't really have a better option. There's not
you
really a
know,
better solution here. You don't have your draft picks. Those two
I think
guys make so much money. I think you just try it.
I think really the last thing you can do is blow it up because of the financial implications of, like, ticket sales and all that stuff. Like unless you're getting like Wemby, which obviously is not even like part of the plan, like it's really hard to sell an optimism when this team is like where it is right now. It's like I'm not gonna say worse than limbo, but it's sort of like you're in a situation where you just can't win. Like, okay, let's replay this. Let's run it back next season, and then we go through it again. And then do you make the call then? Like right before you open an arena? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, I always say you got to be able to sell your fans and your owner on one of two things: hope or winning. And luckily for them, and unfortunately for them, they can sell hope. So we'll have to wait and see if those guys can finally get healthy. I really hope that they can bring a winner to the Clippers because frankly they deserve it at this point. They've tried so hard to make this happen. This is not one of these cheap owners that's you know not really doing the right thing. I feel like they've done everything right, and those two guys just couldn't be healthy. But we'll see how it plays out. Last series I want to talk about Lakers Grizzlies. Lakers up 3-2. We've seen some big performances out of basically every star in this series, and it's been pretty good overall. Do you see the Lakers clinching this thing at home in Game 6?
Yeah, I think this series can get wrapped up at home for the Lakers. I think right now I don't even know if Ja were healthy, this would have made a difference. I just think the Lakers have this like swagger right now. They're sort of clicking at the right moment. Um, and the Grizzlies just they're obviously a good team. They're like the number 2 in the West, but they just I think they're missing like a veteran. I think if Adams were playing, I think it would have made this series a little closer, but I think the Lakers are gonna win this in advance.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're still missing Adams. They're also missing Brandon Clark, who is a really good
Oh yeah.
backup big, who probably could have started as a 4 for a lot of teams, and he's not out. He's out as well. So they're really thin there. They're playing Jaren Jackson more. They need more out of him offensively. And you know, they tried some things in game 5 where they tried to go small and the Lakers tried to match them as playing small, and you have LeBron getting blown by as like the small ball center. So it's like, can you try that again? Can you can you get a 10-point lead at the half doing that before the Lakers adjust? And it's all about adjustments and matchups. And I think this series is going to come down to the wire. I'm going to take the Lakers with you just because I think that crowd's really going to make a difference in game 6. But I think those two teams are more evenly matched than we think, especially with the Grizzlies injuries. But we'll have to wait and see. Plenty more playoffs coming up. Thank you to Chris. Thank you
Oh,
to
I just wanted to say something real quick. How amazing was Trey Young the other night? Like essentially like grabbing the Hawks as they were drowning
Ice
in
Trey's back.
and we said what we said about Trey, and a lot of it could still apply, but it's just amazing how listen, the Hawks aren't back, but and we're recording this podcast before what is it, game 6?
Yes. Game
Before game
6 will be
6.
tonight.
Game 6, Thursday night. They even had to move um a concert because they know I guess the
Didn't expect it.
Hawks didn't expect it. Um, but good on them for making this into a little bit more of a series, and who knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah, no, it should be great. And Trey has been fantastic the last 3 games. 32 points in game 3. Then he had 35 and 15 in that crazy game 4. And then 38 and 13 in game 5, where he really made that crazy shot from almost half court to take the lead. And it was awesome to see.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to do it for the All Hoops podcast. Thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on Spotify. We'll be back next week to talk more NBA action, including the Knicks in the second round.
Bye, everyone.